The United States has been in an ongoing war on drugs since former President Richard Nixon declared that drug use was public enemy number one in 1971. Since that day, the United States has actively sought to disrupt drug trade, eradicate drug use, and incarcerate drug addicts. From the day that the war on drugs began, it is estimated that the United States has spent an estimated $1.1 trillion to work towards the elimination of drug use and drug sales. On average, this equates to about $3.3 billion spent every year towards incarcerating American citizens for drug-related charges. Under this policy, we're seeing more and more Americans being arrested for petty drug use when they are not harming others. In 2015 alone, 1.25 million people were arrested on drug-related charges. The problem is that under this policy, we're not seeing any positive changes. More and more of the public are being incarcerated, but there's no correlation to arrests and limiting drug use. We're spending billions of dollars every year to reduce drug addiction. However, none of that money being thrown at this issue is working. The war on drugs is a practice that is leading to the unfair incarceration of minorities, the misuse of American tax dollars, and an epidemic of opioid use that is not slowing down. One of the main issues with the current legislation for illegal substances is the unfair and institutionalized racism that stems from its outreach. Of the nearly 1.5 million people arrested for drug-related charges each year, about 80% are for simple drug possession. Of those people that are incarcerated for this simple drug possession, African Americans constitute 35% of those in state prison. This is despite African Americans only making up about 13% of the United States population. Furthermore, Black Americans are 4 times as likely to be arrested for basic marijuana charges, while 80% of those serving time for federal drug offenses are Black or Latino. Taking into account all of the clear issues with our current system, it is obvious that this is not a surface level issue. Minorities in America are being incarcerated at drastically higher rates for harmless drug possession, and there are mountains of data that back up this claim. Considering that different demographics in the U.S. use recreational drugs at largely the same rate, this gap raises a ton of red flags. Using our tax dollars to discriminately imprison citizens is an enormous waste of time, resources, and money. Having such a large disparity of arrests between different demographics in our country is a huge problem. Allowing it to continue is even worse. Besides the fact that the war on drugs has led to the mass incarceration of minorities and Americans in general, the main problem with this policy is that it simply does not work. Since the war on drugs has been initiated in this country, drug use has not gone down. The drug trade has not gone away, and health problems related to drugs have continued to increase. In addition to this, drug-related violence, disease, and more have only gotten worse due to this prohibition-style criminalization of drugs. According to the Johns Hopkins Lancet Commission on Drug Policy and Health, the recent drug policies portrayed by policymakers to be necessary to preserve public health and safety, and yet they directly and indirectly contribute to lethal violence, disease, discrimination, forced displacement, injustice, and the undermining of people's right to health. The same commission also found that continued criminalization of drug use fuels HIV, hepatitis C, and tuberculosis transmission within prisons and the community at large. And finally, they found that homicides in Mexico have increased so much since military forces began policing drug traffickers in 2006 that life expectancy in the country has been reduced. This study shows us that not only is the harsh criminalization of drugs not reducing drug use or drug addiction, but is actually perpetuating diseases and homicide while reducing an entire country's life expectancy. Continuing to pursue a policy that has been proven to be ineffective and extremely harmful to international communities is irresponsible, it's reprehensible, and is ridiculous. If we continue to utilize and encourage the prohibition of drugs, we are consciously deciding to put people of multiple nations at risk of disease and violent crime. The United States war on drugs is a socially and economically irresponsible policy that dehumanizes people internationally. By providing a platform for lawmakers and enforcers to biasly, discriminately incarcerate people of color in America, we are consciously allowing biased policies to shape our future. Millions of Americans are being arrested every year for harmless drug possession, and our citizens are forced to watch their tax dollars go to waste. With over $3 billion being spent each year to imprison these citizens, we are wasting time, money, and resources. If we utilize these resources differently, we could fund education, address our homelessness issues, or invest in sustainable energies. Marijuana legalization alone could generate an estimated $13.7 billion from additional tax revenue and averted enforcement costs. With that much additional revenue available, we could send over 650,000 students to college annually. As drug addiction, homicide, and diseases continue to increase every year due to this ridiculous policy, it makes no practical sense for us to continue this way. We're spending billions every year to fix an issue that is getting worse. For us as a country to initiate any lasting change, we must decriminalize drugs and use our resources elsewhere. Thank you.